force his own privacy to kind of get his world back together. She tells him that he'll marry a 17-year-old girl in Greece, and that he'll have 3 children with the names Atlantis, Gilgamesha, and Methuselah, using the old names. And that he will have 10 years of very hard life before his next contacts are going to start, which will be in 1975. When these contacts in 75 start, which will be with the Plejadians, she says around that time period he will be invited to come to Germany to address a UFO Congress there in Berlin. And once they find out, though, the types of things that he was going to say, the kind of truths that he's going to talk about, they'll cancel his engagement. They won't want him to speak because Billy's going to speak some very hard, harsh truths about life and religion, and this UFO group there is based all around religion. This is a UFO group who believes they've been contacted by ETs who are somehow sent on behalf of God. And they are, believing this, and they are, don't want Billy involved now suddenly in their operation because he's going to come and tell them the truth about creation, and they just don't want to hear that. She said it's also important that no one uses the name that Billy had been traveling by in Persia, which was Phantom. Apparently, even though his name was Edward, on his travels around and so forth, he was using the name Phantom for some reason. Now, I don't know where that came from. But she told me from that time on, from 1975 on, he should never use that name again. He should only use Edward and Billy, which will be his new name at that time. At that particular time of the contact, she said that there was 2.7 million people on Earth who had seen a UFO. There were 3,104 Earth people who had actually had contact with extraterrestrials. Most of these contacts were telepathic. Some of them were actually physical contacts. There seem to be, around 3,000 ships a year come into our atmosphere. A very small percentage of those really have very much interest in us. They just kind of look over the planet or stop and get something, pick up whatever they might want. But a few of them actually will have some physical contacts from time to time with Earth beings. These will generally only be 1 time or 2 times because they're just passing by. They very seldom ever lead into anything, on running. So there aren't really that many people out there that have, actually had contacts with the ETs. She said also, beginning in 1964, that he would start writing down all of his contacts. And again, we're still in 1956 here. She told him beginning in 64, he'd start writing them down, and it would be with the help of the technology from extraterrestrials, that he would continue to have meetings, contacts, teachings, and so forth, just like was going on here. It wouldn't be necessary for him to take notes and write them down, that the extraterrestrials, and in particular Ascot, had the ability to store all of the thoughts and words and feelings in their own subconscious. And they had devices on board the ship which could recall these words, thoughts, and feelings from their subconscious at any time, and they could forward them on telepathically to Billy so he could actually write down all the notes from his conversations. And this is what did happen over the years. When Billy's contacts with the Plejadians started, that's exactly what they did. He would be on board a ship. All the thoughts, feelings, and words and so forth were recorded into the subconscious of Semjase. And later on, their devices would actually pull these thoughts back out of the subconscious and telepathically send them to Billy so he could type and write down all of his contact notes. Well, they settle down and go back to sleep again in the ship, which they do. They spend the night again in Ascot's ship there in Jordan. And they're woke up in the morning by a gunshot, which they're kind of surprised. And Billy looks outside, and there's Jitchi standing out there with a rifle. Well, this is kind of a surprise. They come out of the ship, and here's Jitchi, and he, of course, is greatly surprised to find this big silver beam ship, or I guess you should just call it a flying saucer here, because it's not a beam ship type drive. Ascot's ship were different. So they have to go through this process of explaining things to Jitchi. Jitchi, of course, gets very excited, and suddenly he says, "Oh, God, you guys must be from Venus or Mars or something." And Ascot's saying, "Surely we're not. We're not from there at all. There's no life forms on Venus or Mars." And Jitchi's pretty excited, as you might well understand. And he thinks Edward and Ascot are probably both ETs. And Edward's informing him, no, that he's an earthworm just like him. And he's from Earth, and that the lady Ascot, is an extraterrestrial. Well, Jitsi thinks she's an angel right away and says, "Oh, surely you must be here on behalf of God." And he pulls his Bible out right away and is saying, "Oh, look, I believe in God, I believe in Jesus, and I study the Bible all the time." And Ask gets a little taken back by this and begins to explain that no, that she or no extraterrestrials come on behalf of God, that any extraterrestrials that claim that are just being deceptive and very wicked, and they shouldn't do that. So they go through this process of explaining all about who they are and what they're doing, that they're getting ready to take a trip. Well, this kind of throws Asket off. She wasn't expecting this at all, for Jitsi to turn up right here and doesn't know exactly what to do about it. So the opportunity is extended to Jitsi to come along with them, that they're going to be making some travels and jumps and going different places. And Jitsi, of course, says no, he doesn't want to, that this is against God, it's blasphemy, and he's going on about this. And Edward jumps all over him about being a coward and what good is your Christianity if you have no control over yourself. And they get into kind of a word thing going there. The outshot of it is that Jitsi decides, okay, he will come along, by golly. So they say, all right. So they move towards the ship, and Jitsi goes first. They push him up into the lift, and he goes up in the ship, and they come up after him. And there's poor Jitsi. He's just pale white, and he gets so sick he vomits, unfortunately, in a little bag that he has with him. And Asket has to calm him down, and suddenly Jitsi remembers that he left all of his stuff back at his camp, and they let Jitsi go get his stuff and return, and then they take off. Well, they're in the ship, and they're getting ready to lift off from Earth again. Jitsi is still just pale white, doesn't know what to make of all of this. He's about 59 years old, by the way, and spent most all of his life studying the Bible, and now suddenly here's these people telling him that everything that he's learned so far is wrong, and it's making him ill. And this could be a very good example of what they're talking about. If the extraterrestrials were to suddenly make themselves well known and provide irrefutable proof that much of our belief structure is wrong, it can be very seriously affecting on many people. It can make them ill in thought. It'll literally just drive people crazy, and that's exactly just about what's happening with Jitsi. And now they're in the 13th century. Edward's standing out on the ground, and he immediately starts to kind of notice nature all around him. First thing he notices is there is a larger abundance of birds and so forth in the air. The air itself is more cleaner. The oxygen content seems to be a little higher, cleaner, easier to breathe. You feel a little exhilarated, he said. And they're in France at the time of Louis the Saint, and they're going to visit a rabbi by the name of Gicelli. Also, the sky looked a little bit different in color. He remarked how the blueness of the sky was more blue and clearer and cleaner than he had seen it before. And he's still living in Switzerland in 1956, which is a pretty clean place. So going back several hundred years, before we started filling the air even with industrial pollution, things looked a little better. So they're somewhere in the woods in France, and Asket leads them on, and they move through the forest a little way, and they come across this little house, and she's telling them that she's been here a couple of times before, and she has a friend here. And they're look around, there's a horse in the barn, and suddenly a bearded fellow comes out the front of the door, and it's Gicelli. And he's a real happy, friendly type people, and he's waving and so forth, and he comes over, and he's happy to see Asket. "Oh, hello, so nice of you to come again." And he says, "Are these your extraterrestrial friends?" And Asket says, "No, these are Earth people just like yourself, but they're from the future." Well, this doesn't seem to shock Gicelli too much. He just kind of takes it in stride and comments that, "Oh, how wonderful. I wish just once that this beautiful lady would take me for a ride so I could experience some of this." But it isn't explained why Asket has been there 2 times before, but apparently she has, for whatever reason, to see Gicelli. Gicelli is already known in the area as kind of a magician and a person who fools around with unusual things and so forth. So right away he notices Edward's lantern that he has with him, a little electric lantern with a light on it, and he asks him about what that is. So Edward's explained it